Today, we have something intense to discuss. Shocking drone footage showing Ukraine destroying a Russian convoy. This video has been circulating widely, stirring reactions from all sides, and in this episode, we're going to break down what we see, the implications, and what it all could mean moving forward. As always, I urge you to watch carefully, think critically, and hold space for complexities because in conflict, it's rarely black and white. The drone footage opens with an aerial view over a landscape marked by rolling hills, forested patches, dusty roads, and signs of recent conflict. Scorched trees, wrecked vehicles, the kind of terrain that tells a story long before any words are spoken. The convoy appears to be moving along a supply route, trucks and armored vehicles lined up, snaking through the terrain. You can see gaps between the vehicles, but they're close enough that one strike could trigger a chain reaction. What stands out is the sheer vulnerability of moving targets in such a formation. Road width, cover, and routes are limited, as is the ability to diverge. After a brief aerial survey, the drone operator seems to narrow in, focusing on several heavy trucks. Some appear to be fuel tankers, others are carrying supplies, possibly ammunition, food, medical gear. There's also what looks like armored personnel carriers or transports. The movement is steady but cautious, flags of fatigue visible, dust kicked up under wheels, perhaps some casual pacing, the convoy not expecting an immediate strike or believing their escort and route secure enough. Then it happens, the strike. A projectile or missile lances through the air precise sudden and impacts one of the fuel trucks. There is an explosion, fire blooming outward, thick smoke rising. Immediately that truck becomes a focal point, flaring up against the sky. The blast wave causes secondary explosions in nearby vehicles. Some trucks rupture, passengers scramble for cover, and chaos ensues. The drone footage captures this all with harrowing clarity. Metal twisting, flames licking around tires, debris flung tens of meters away. It's visceral, shocking. After the initial strike, the drone circles, zooms in. You see soldiers, some scrambling to put out fires, some dismounted, some pinned down. A number of trucks are burning, cargo lost. Some vehicles manage to reverse or attempt to retreat. You can see black smoke columns marking multiple blended points of impact. In the aftermath, we see the silence of destruction, twisted metal, empty frames, scattered gear, sometimes bodies. The drone's perspective shifts, revealing how devastating even a single well-placed strike can be in a convoy arranged tightly in terrain that gives little room to disperse. Visual details matter. The camera captures roads lined with grass and bushes, limited tree cover. There's little high terrain to shelter behind. The convoy seems exposed. Even modest aerial reconnaissance could spot movement easily, especially in daylight. That exposure makes them vulnerable. Once identified, there is little they can do against precision weapons or competent drone operators. The way the fire spreads from fuel trucks intensifies the damage. Some are destroyed not just by direct hits, but by secondary explosions and fire spreading to adjacent vehicles. A burning fuel truck becomes an incendiary trap, engulfing nearby targets. We must consider the technology involved. Presumably, the attacking side used drones for scouting and intelligence, locating the target, then coordinated strikes, perhaps using guided missiles or rockets, maybe even loitering munitions. The strike that ignites fuel suggests a powerful warhead capable of penetrating fuel tanks, something with precision to hit the vulnerable parts. The drone footage suggests real-time or near-real-time targeting. The attackers know when and where the convoy is at sufficient resolution. That implies good signals intelligence or forward observers, combined with aerial surveillance assets including drones or perhaps satellites. The implications are considerable. First, supply lines are absolutely critical in any conflict. If you can disrupt logistics, fuel, ammunition, food, you can degrade the enemy's capacity without direct confrontation. In this case, Ukraine appears to be doing exactly that, targeting Russian logistics. The effectiveness of these strikes undermines not just material support, but morale. Every destroyed convoy is also a message that movement equals risk. It forces shifts in planning, more dispersed convoys traveling under cover of darkness, using decoy routes, more air defense, more camouflage, more electronic jamming, more drone detection, and these come at cost. Second, the psychological impact is stark. For troops moving in these convoys, the knowledge that each vehicle could be a target, that an invisible drone overhead may be watching, that any movement is potentially lethal, increases stress, slows movement, complicates operations. For local populations seeing cloud of smoke, charred remains, loss of life, these images can become potent symbols, rallying calls, or indeed sources of fear. Third, the role of drones in modern warfare is magnified yet again. Drone technology, both in surveillance and armed forms, has become accessible, relatively cheap, very efficient. A small drone overhead can enable strikes that once required large reconnaissance assets. The ability to film, to document, to broadcast has strategic and propaganda value too. The visual record from drones gives one side leverage in information warfare, proof, or at least raw material, to shape narratives about who is winning, who is suffering, who is responsible. Analyzing further, the footage suggests tactical strengths and weaknesses. The attacking force seems to have good intelligence, capable of anticipating route, timing, and concentration of the convoy. Perhaps insiders feeding information, perhaps repeated observation. On the other hand, the convoy appears less aware, less capable of mitigation. I don't see much in terms of overhead cover, overhead suppression fire, anti-aircraft assets visible, or decoy vehicles. There's no obvious heavy air defense overhead to suppress drones. That leaves a vulnerability that can be exploited. Another point, timing. The footage appears to be taken during daylight, which favors aerial spotting. Night movement might reduce visibility, but also carries its own risks. So attackers might shift operations more aggressively during daylight if they dominate the sky, or when weather permits. Defenders have to adjust. Night movement, use of terrain, use of camouflage nets, reducing thermal signatures, employing radar or other sensors to detect incoming aerial threats. Moreover, logistical routes need constant protection. Supply convoys are essential but also predictable. Repetitive patterns, same time, same route, are especially vulnerable. In this case, if this convoy had regular schedules or known paths, that increases chances of being ambushed or struck. Diversifying routes, employing alternate paths, or splitting supplies among multiple smaller convoys might reduce risk, but that also increases complexity and cost. Internationally, this kind of footage often raises questions about war crimes, about civilian damage, collateral damage. In theory, attacks on purely military convoys are legitimate under law of armed conflict. But if such convoys move through civilian areas, or are intermingled with civilians, or if civilians are harmed, these events provoke scrutiny. The video doesn't clearly show civilians being hit, or civilians nearby, but visibility is limited. There is always risk that explosions, fuel fires, debris, and smoke affect non-combatants downwind or in adjacent areas. The environmental impact can also be significant. Burning fuel, spilled cargo, particularly if there is ammunition, chemicals, can cause soil contamination, water contamination, destruction of nearby vegetation, risk of forest fires. These are often secondary effects not immediately obvious in the dramatic explosion, but visible over time. After the battle, landscapes suffer, wildlife suffers, cleanup is dangerous and costly. There's also political signaling. Ukraine showing they can hit logistical targets demonstrates they have reach. It boosts their credibility, both domestically and internationally. For Russia, such loss is embarrassing, raises doubts about operational security, about armored supply chain resilience. Allies watching see that logistical vulnerabilities are critical. Aid, from munitions to intelligence to drone tech, becomes more relevant. Supporters of Ukraine may see this as proof effective aid works. Supporters of Russia may see urgent need to bolster protection, disperse supply, invest in air defense. In terms of lessons learned for similar conflicts elsewhere, every belligerent must consider that logistics are not just background, they are prime targets. Modern conflicts often hinge as much on supply as on frontline fighting. Movement, concealment, deception, redundancy, asset protection are all as important as the size of one's force. Ensuring that convoys are not predictable, are well defended, switch routes, use camouflage, employ decoy tactics, have overhead cover, these are essential. Also, the importance of reconnaissance and real-time intelligence cannot be overstated. Drone operators, signal intelligence, satellite imagery, all feed into identifying targets. Attacking forces that combine these elements gain advantage. Defending forces must disrupt these intel streams, jam drones, reduce emissions, mislead observers, use decoys, camouflage signature, engage electronic warfare if possible. Now, turning to possible countermeasures for those exposed in the footage. First, better anti-air capability. Even small anti-drone defenses, perhaps portable air defense systems, radar or acoustic detection, jamming capabilities. If convoys have escort assets that can watch skies or listen for drone buzz, that could provide warning and reduce surprise. Second, better route selection, choosing less predictable paths, using terrain to mask movement, employing tree cover or valleys rather than open roads, traveling under forest canopy or built-up areas where radar/drones find it harder. Third, moving at night or bad weather, when drone observation is degraded. Fourth, breaking up convoys, rather than one big group, use smaller, staggered movements. Fifth, dispersing supplies to reduce concentration risk. Instead of putting everything in trucks in one place, spread out, cache supplies temporarily, move when necessary. Also, protection of fuel trucks and ammunition vehicles is essential. They are high-value targets. They require added armor, dispersion, shielding, slowed movement, or even transport through less obvious means. Encasing fuel containers, burying fuel supply, or using pipelines where possible. Ensuring that fuel vehicles are escorted, perhaps disguised or moved with decoys to draw fire. From the attacker's perspective, coordination is vital. Using drones for both reconnaissance and strike, coordinating with ground forces, using precise munitions to avoid wasted explosive force. But also considering risk. Every strike in conflict zones carries potential for unintended damage. They must ensure that collateral damage is minimized, best possible intelligence used, repeat verification of target identity, perhaps use of dual key procedures or rule of engagement constraints. Also, after the strike, being aware of the need to follow up, denying salvage of supplies by the enemy, possibly exploiting damage to degrade further movement, looking at the impact on supply chain after such a destruction. Surviving vehicles likely will avoid the same route. They might need to reroute, which is longer, costlier, slower, more fuel intensive. Maintenance demands increase because surviving vehicles may have been damaged. Drivers may become hesitant. Insurance, if there is any, or willingness to serve in those units drops. Replacement of destroyed stock costs time and resources. Another dimension, the information war. Footage like this is not just about destruction. It becomes content, shared online, amplified, driving public perception, potentially influencing international aid, raising pressure on all sides. Ukraine may publish such footage to show effectiveness, boost morale, galvanize support. Russia may attempt to downplay or counter with their own narratives, denial, blame-shifting, explanations of successes elsewhere. Independent media may verify geolocations, timestamps, damage to establish truth. Misinformation and propaganda risk are real. Audiences must critically evaluate: is the footage genuine? Has it been manipulated? Is the target as claimed? Is the location confirmed? The risk of misidentification is not trivial in wartime visuals. When viewers see such footage, immediate emotional reaction is normal. Horror, sadness, maybe even jubilation if one supports a side. But for analysis, it's important to step back and ask, what are the impacts? Who benefits? Who loses? What are the costs? And what are the moral dimensions? There is also the matter of human cost. Beyond the vehicles and supplies, lives are at stake. Soldiers, support personnel, possible civilian bystanders, families, communities. Each vehicle destroyed may carry dozens of people, and each loss ripples out. Fuel trucks exploding can burn people, cause injuries, deaths. Survivors may suffer long-term. Trauma, displacement, loss matters. The object-level mechanics of destruction are easier to watch than the daily human consequences, which often unfold quietly later. Thinking forward, what might this mean for upcoming operations? Potentially, forces on the move will take more precautions. Routes that once felt safe may no longer be. Commanders might limit movement of critical supplies in large convoys. They may increase investment in aerial protection and add short-range air defense. Drones may proliferate further on both sides. More detection drones, more attack drones. Electronic warfare becomes more central. Detection, jamming, spoofing. Camouflage techniques and low signature materials will see more demand. Aid donors might look at this and say, supply chain support is not just giving trucks and fuel, but also protection assets. For Ukraine's allies, funding drones, fuel trucks, protective gear, training and convoy security might become priorities. For Russia's logistical planners, this is a cautionary tale. Even deep supply lines are at risk, even in territory you believe controlled. The notion that rear areas are safe is challenged by drones and precision weapons. There are also legal and diplomatic dynamics. If the location of the strike lies near civilian infrastructure or crosses borders, there may be allegations of violation of sovereignty or humanitarian law. If the convoy was in or near populated areas or caused environmental damage, international bodies may demand investigation. Transparency by both sides, or lack thereof, can influence diplomatic reactions. Civilian casualties can trigger condemnation, aid restrictions, or sanctions. Another angle, the resilience of logistics under fire. Once a force knows its supply convoys are being attacked, what systems can it put in place to absorb losses? That may include redundancy, storing supplies in multiple smaller depots closer to the front, building pipelines, railways, or alternative transport forms, perhaps moving supplies underground or through subterranean tunnels or covered transport, using camouflage, decoys, decoy convoys to mask real ones. Moreover, training troops and drivers to respond under fire becomes necessary, firing back, seeking cover, improving route security, reacting quickly to incoming threats. Evacuation of wounded, salvage of undamaged cargo, rapid repair or replacement of vehicles. All of these matter once the convoy is under attack. Technology-wise, better drone detection systems are critical. Radar capable of detecting small UAV, acoustic sensors, optical sensors, also using counter, drones, jamming, shooting down, capturing. In some cases, laser systems are being developed, in others, projectiles. The aim is to reduce the window during which an attacker can target with impunity. Talking about escalation, there's risk too. As one side increases its use of drones and long-range precision, the other may escalate with more air defense, perhaps electronic warfare, perhaps strikes into rear areas, perhaps cross-border responses. That can widen the conflict, increase cost, risk supply lines themselves being attacked deeper inside territory thought safe. On the humanitarian side, recovery operations post-strike are dangerous. Fire, unexploded ordnance, shaped charges, burning fuel. Those attempting to rescue survivors or retrieve cargo risk secondary explosions. Environmental damage, as said, can poison water sources, soil. Access for civilians might be blocked, agriculture affected. Local populations may be displaced, aid may need to be rerouted, supply chains for civilians disrupted. One also wonders how accurate casualty counting will be. In war, initial numbers are often estimates. With drone footage, one can count vehicle wreckage, but human casualties may remain unknown. Some might flee, some may be missing. Documentation helps later accountability, but on-the-ground uncertainty remains high. Media-wise, footage like this sometimes is incomplete. Drone angles may not show full identity of vehicles or whether civilians nearby. It may not show what preceded the footage, whether convoy was warned, whether any attempts to divert or protect were made. We have to ask, is what we see the full story? Is there context missing? Who took the footage? When? Under what rules of engagement? Sometimes footage may be edited, sometimes selective. All this must be kept in mind when drawing conclusions. Yet footage is powerful. It shapes perceptions. It may influence policy, perhaps accelerate requests for more aid, more air defense systems, more drones. Photos and video are often key evidence in post. Conflict assessments, war crime investigations, historical record. Those who control the narrative have a significant advantage, but so do those who can produce verifiable, undeniable proof. Stepping back, this particular event may be one of many in a long, grinding conflict. It may not change the broad strategic map alone, but these losses add up. Disrupted supplies lead to stalled offensives, lowered morale, inability to sustain damage, inability to reinforce or resupply frontline units. Over months, these cumulative losses may shift balance. For Ukraine, successes in targeting such convoys demonstrate an ability to strike deep, reduce enemy operational capacity, perhaps gain leverage. But Ukraine will need to ensure its own supply lines are secure, its logistics resilient, its air defense capable. For Russia, this must be a warning: vehicle protection, route security, air defense, UAV detection. Operational deception are not optional but essential. To conclude, the drone footage of Ukraine destroying a Russian convoy is shocking not only for the visuals, but for what it reveals: the vulnerability of exposed supply lines, the effectiveness of modern surveillance and strike systems, the importance of intelligence, and the rising costs of logistics in modern warfare. The destruction is immediate, visceral, brutal, but the longer-term consequences of lost supplies, lost trust, shifted tactics may be even more profound. If there's one thing this video teaches, it's that moving supplies in a war zone is one of the most dangerous tasks. It takes courage, discipline, planning, protection, and when an opponent has the means, the knowledge, the tools, the consequences for mistakes are devastating. Thank you all for watching this analysis. Let me know what you think. Do you believe convoys will become even more dispersed and stealthy? Will drone warfare escalate to counter drone battles? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you found this explanation helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed.